I know, I know. You're all very angry right now. Just dropped their third in a row, out of the playoff spot. I'm fed up with a lot of things right now, but still have to churn out some content for you all. We're going to recap this painful game against the Islanders, a 4-2 loss for the Penguins, the best we can. I have Phil from Islanders Twitter here to join me for this episode. It's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm, of course, your host, Hunter Hodes. You're going to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. You can visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. Joining me now for today's episode, I have a very special guest. He has not joined the podcast before, but I figured, they're supposed to play the Islanders twice in, 3-4 days at this point. Figured I would have Phil from the Islanders Twitter on at Phil's Facts on Twitter. Phil, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad I'm able to have another first-time guest for the show.
Thank you for bringing me on. Excited to be here.
Yeah, we've been, I feel like we've been going back and forth about, Pens and the Islanders for probably the last couple of years. I think that's when, we followed each other during this series, which was, basically a carbon copy. I think these last two games were a carbon copy of how that series went.
Yeah,
Penguins jump out on them early. They're getting some goals on Sorokin, but Sorokin is playing well at the same time. He played like God in this game on Monday night. But some shady defensive play, some not good goaltending from the Penguins leads to another Islanders win. And, the Islanders have had their number 2 the last 3 years. And I think last year, it was at least a split, or the Penguins maybe won 3 out of 4. I haven't double checked that, but I know they beat them at least a couple times. But, for me, it's just these two games over these last couple of days that the Penguins have dropped, even though they've had leads late in those games. It just feels like exactly what happened in 2021, except both teams are not nearly as good right now.
Agreed. Yeah. I mean, with Sorokin, the odd thing is I think tonight was like the 11th or 12th time that more than 40 shots have been put on him, and his record in those games is something like 8-2-3. So he just seems like the kind of goaltender where he gets stronger as the game goes on. And when he sees more pucks, he becomes more and more locked in. To me, this was, at least through the first 40 minutes, outside of the misplay by, I can't remember who it was. Was it O'Connor at the blue line?
The first one was Drew O'Connor, swatted at the puck. Should not have done that. I think if he doesn't do that, he gets back.
Outside of that, I mean, they played a pretty buttoned up tight game. I thought their power play was fine. Their PP1 wasn't great. The PP2 was really good, though. They generated chances. If not for a miraculous Romanov swat at the puck on the goal line, it would have been 2-0. And I don't think the Islanders, with the depleted roster that they were playing tonight, I don't think they would have had it in them to come back from a 2-goal deficit like they did the other night when they had Barzal putting on a show in the third period. But this was one of those lopsided Islanders-Penguins games that we've grown accustomed to over the past couple of years, where the Islanders get elite-level goaltending by Ilya Sorokin, and then they have enough guys up front like Nelson. And this year it wasn't Josh Bailey because he's out, or this game it wasn't Bailey because he's out, and it wasn't Barzal because he's out, but now we have Bo Horvat, and he's a guy that could put the puck in the net too and create a little bit of offense.
Yeah, no, Bo Horvat has been awesome, obviously, since joining the Islanders. But, yeah, I mean, I think you said it best. I thought the Penguins, they were playing mostly fine defensively through the first 2 periods. They gave up, a few odd man rushes during that time. I think one of them, they gave up a breakaway right after they got the 2-1 lead, which is they've been doing this all year, it feels like. And I don't know why their brains just shut off for some reason. I don't get it, but, Sorokin, I mean, he's stupid good. It really is crazy that the Penguins are going to have to be going up against him and Igor Shesterkin for many years to come. That's not going to be a fun duo up in New York. But, his save on Letang was probably one of the best saves I think I've seen made at PPG Paints Arena in the history that the arena has been there since 2010, 2011. They score there, Phil. 3-1. Game's maybe, I don't know. I wouldn't say it's over because the Penguins blew the 2-goal lead on Long Island late in the second period on Friday night, but I think it would have been pretty hard for the Islanders to climb out of that for sure. But, that's just been a common theme for the Penguins this season. They haven't gotten as good of goaltending as, maybe they should, and the other team is. And that's been a big issue. That's been a big difference. The team's defending, I think, has also been really piss poor for a lot of times this season where, their brains they shut off. A lot of odd man rushes against. You saw that with the first Nelson goal. You saw the bad defensive play at the Anders Lee goal. Well, also it helps that Tristan Jarry kind of gave the puck away, Josh Bailey in Game 5. But, the defensive play down at the net front was also not good there. And for the second goal, P.O. Joseph has an attorney to get the puck out, opts for a really kind of like a high-risk play along the boards. Islander player jumps up, Horvat comes in, bad goal from Jarry. It's just those issues this year have been brutal for this team, especially over the last 5 to 6 weeks. And that's costing them precious points in the standings, despite having all these games in hand. And again, those don't mean anything if you don't win them. And that's why, even though the math is still good, for me right now, I see them, it's over 50% that I see them missing the playoffs, which I don't think I've ever said in the Sid Gino era.
You have them at over 50% of missing the playoffs?
Yeah. I'm that concerned with how just the bottom half of the roster is performing. I'll say this. I won't be surprised if they get in because the core can turn it on anytime. They've been carrying them all year. And if Tristan Jarry can bounce back from this and stay healthy, I won't be surprised. But, they're just throwing these points away. And if the GM really doesn't do much about it at the deadline, it's hard for me to see them getting in, to be honest. And again, I'm usually a very, very positive person when it comes to this team. I see so many negative reactionary takes, but it's just, I feel like I've just been seeing this movie too many times before where it's like, okay, I'm not really sure if they're going to make the playoffs this season.
The way I was looking at it, up until the Barzal injury, which they're saying week to week, the fourth period put out a tweet where he said that he thinks it could be up to 8 weeks is what he's hearing, but it doesn't require surgery. And you never know with Pagnotta as to how accurate he is. But I was looking at it as you got the Penguins, who to me, up until this weekend, were the most firmly in place in a playoff position. Yeah. And now they lost 3 in a row in regulation. The Panthers, I mean, I just don't see how a team that has given up the second most goals in the East to Columbus and probably, I mean, they came inches away from losing to the Ducks today. It took 2 comebacks against the Ducks at home to win. I don't see how the Panthers get in. You look at the Senators, and they've been streaking lately, but I just think they're going to run out of steam at some point. There's Detroit, but they've got a brutal schedule down the stretch, as does Buffalo, right? Buffalo has all these games in hand, but they're about to go through a gauntlet. They've got, this week alone, they've got Toronto, they've got Tampa, they've got Florida. I mean, they have them and Detroit have the 2 hardest schedules of all these contending teams. To me, I thought it was going to come down to the Islanders, the Capitals, and the Penguins. But with the Barzal injury, I think the Penguins are in pretty good shape.
I appreciate that optimism. That's for sure. I just, it's just tough when I see the same mistakes being repeated and the goaltending continues to be spotty. And it's just like, even with those games in hand, are you still going to be good enough to where you can get in? And it would be total Penguins for them to get in and everyone's writing them off and then they win at least a round. And it's like, this is the kind of team that wins a round. It would, and I would be glad to be proven wrong. Don't get me wrong. It's just something just seems very off and, it's not going to get any easier when they have the Oilers coming up on Thursday, a team that's been struggling, but we all know how good they are. But that wraps up this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to get into what Phil's main turning point for this game was, because the Penguins looked like they were really in control of this one before, about almost midway through the third period where it all went to crap. We're going to get into that plus so much more from this one. But before we touch on that, our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I start taking Athletic Greens because, I didn't have time in the morning. I wanted better gut health, more energy, all that stuff. So you're probably wondering, what is all this? With one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you'll absorb 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, and probiotics to help you start your day right. This special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, your energy, recovery, focus, and aging. All of those things. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. It also costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit, and it has over 7,000 five-star reviews. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day, and that's it. There's no need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That, of course, is Phil from Islanders Twitter. So, a lot of twists and turns in this one. Obviously, Phil, the big scrum in the second period, which led to a lot of penalties. Looked like just a, old-fashioned barn fight, back from the 80s and stuff, kind of reminding me a little bit of the Trevor Gillies crap that we all saw.
That meme was floating around tonight.
12 years ago. Yeah, I will know.
That one was floating around tonight. Fight
yes. Night. I will never have a good thing to say about Trevor Gillies, but I know Islanders fans obviously will. But, what do you think was the main turning point in this game? Because the Penguins, they had this one bottled up. It seemed like for a while, Tristan Jarry was playing well in his return. What do you think was the turning point?
Yeah, I don't think it was the fighting. Although anytime you could trade 14 minutes of Ross Johnston for Jason Zucker, I'm going to take that deal 100 times. I don't even think Ross Johnston played 5 minutes total tonight. We had a couple guys who didn't get much ice time. To me, I thought Jarry was locked in. There were a couple really good saves that he had. Even though the Pens were dominating the first 40 minutes, there were still a couple of opportunities. Martin flung one toward the net that hit a Penguin skate that Jarry was just in a very good position to make a save on. There was the Zach Parise breakaway where he hit him blocker side. Palmieri on the power play had a really good opportunity there. So he was looking good. But I just think for a goaltender who's been out for as long as he has, when he took that rising shot on the penalty kill, right? It was a shorthanded opportunity by Horvat right to the neck.
Yep.
Even with that protective gear there, that rattled him. He was down for a bit. He had that mark there. He was holding his neck and clutching. And I just wondered at that point, is this the type of situation where we have a goalie who's been out for a while, and goalies are creatures of habit and they get into routine and they get on streaks, and maybe we could start throwing pucks at the net on this guy and he'll start doubting himself a little bit just because he's shaken up a bit. And that's what happened, right? Horvat, really not a great angle on that shot, but it managed to go in. And then a couple minutes later, just a really poor play behind the net, managing the puck. And I thought he was doing a good job playing the puck and making good decisions all night. So to me, the turning point in the game really was that Horvat shot directly to his neck. I think that changed a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I would, I honestly kind of agree with you there. The fighting thing, forget it. Jason Zucker, I know he's trying to get the crowd fired up and stuff. That's probably the most emotion I've seen the Penguins show in 5-6 weeks. I think I was getting a text from Josh Yeo, and he put it out on Twitter after that. He covers the team for the Athletic, and he was telling me how Brian Burke was just slamming the table, just up in the press box, just because that's just who he is. But no, that shot definitely stung him. I was hoping beyond hope that it was not going to be another injury because he has had brutal luck this season. But, after that, didn't seem comfortable. That Horvat goal was just such a bad one to allow. Honestly, I didn't really like any of the 3 goals that he allowed tonight, to be honest. He made some good saves, and I know it was his first game back in a month, so I get that aspect. But still, some of the goals that he allowed, I think, are the ones that you probably would want to have back.
So I didn't mind a Nelson goal. I mean, Nelson's been a high-end goal scorer for quite a while now. He's got a ridiculous wrist shot. The only thing I'll say is if you're defending Nelson on a 2-on-1, I mean, there's enough film out there on Nelson to know that he is not a passer. I think he's one of those exceptions, and I think you could throw – he's not in the Ovechkin tier, but there are certain players where you need to cheat a little bit more over toward the shot with a player like Nelson as a defenseman when he's coming in on a 2-on-1 because the odds of him – shooting and scoring there are way higher than him getting that pass over to Palmieri for anything dangerous. And I think maybe Jarry also was thinking pass there. and he flinched ever so slightly, which allowed it to go in. But I had no problem from a Penguins perspective with that goal. The other two, though, I mean, those are just breakdowns. And I've been telling you for a while now, I think that regardless of how well Jari has played, the Penguins need a serious number 2 goalie to be available to them for the playoffs for 2 reasons. Number 1, because of injuries, which we saw last year. And number 2, if he goes cold, you need someone else who you can rely on, right? And the Islanders aren't going to sell right now, and they're not going to sell within the division, so you're not going to get Varlamov. But if there are options out there for you to get a good number 2 goalie to ride with in an emergency type situation, think about what Thomas Vokoun did for them against the Islanders in 2013, maybe, and how he spelled Marc-Andre Fleury when he was falling apart in that series and it was 2-2. That's the type of thing that I think they need.
Yeah, it's kind of slowly starting to creep up my list of deadline needs for this general manager who I don't think there's a way you can bring him back next year at all right now, but that's a strop topic for another day. But that's my biggest issue though is I don't really know how many goalies are available right now. James Reimer, he makes sense. I don't know if the Senators are trading Cam Talbot. I don't know if they're going to trade Cam Talbot. I think he's rumored to be out there. Other than that, I don't really know many other goalies who are out there, that's just my big concern about it. I do agree. I would like to have a better number 2 back there. Casey DeSmith has started too many games this season. He's been good in some, not been so good in others. I say this reference a lot on my show, Jekyll and Hyde. And then, with Jari, he's been very good for most of the seaseason, came into this game with a .921 save percentage, but, they, at times, you got to make a save. And that Horvat one, you make that save there, which is usually routine. Who knows what happens for the rest of that game. I also think the Penguins power play, the second unit is better than the first one right now. The first unit is just out to lunch every time. And I think that was another turning point in this game as well. They had countless opportunities to make this a, multiple goal lead against the Islanders. And the first unit is just not getting any chances in the offensive zone. Sure, Sorokin is coming up with some saves, but the first unit is also just not executing simple passes in the zone. The drop pass when they come into the zone and in the neutral zone, is just horrendous. They continue to be awful in terms of gaining the offensive zone. And once they do, it's just one and done. It feels like the other teams know what's coming. And again, I think that was another big turning point in this game for me. The PK was good for the Penguins in this one. I don't think the Islanders power play is any good, but time and time again, when the power play has had chances to really try and put teams away this season, just hasn't worked out that way. And it's very frustrating.
Yeah. And you're talking about a penalty kill without Pajot, without Clutterbuck. Bailey's not a great penalty killer, but he's one of the regulars. I mean, we were throwing Matt Martin out there on the penalty kill, and I can't remember the last time I saw Martin killing penalties because he's frankly too slow to do that. So, penalty. I was thinking about like power plays. They're such a wild card and enigma, almost like goaltending year to year. You see teams that have like stacked units, like the Penguins. I mean, they've got all world talent on that top unit. You look at the Rangers, who were ranked, I think, second in the league last year, and they're pretty much middle of the pack right now with the same exact personnel. The Islanders were 12th last year, and with pretty much the same exact guys, and now they even have Horvat. It's been better with Horvat. Mm-hmm. Now that Barzal's out, don't talk to me about it because they just can't get in the zone without him. And they were like ranked 30th coming into this game. That's one of those things that I just don't understand, how you can have really elite, high-end, talented players like Crosby, Gensel, Malkin, Letang on a power play unit like that against a depleted team and have nothing dangerous. And then the second unit comes on with Jeff Carter and friends, and they're just generating high danger chances all over the place. And they're the ones that get the goal. It's bizarre.
It's funny, they're keeping it simple. I think that's the best way for me to describe the second unit. They're gaining the zone. Jeff Petry's getting the puck at the point. He's bombing it. And Jason Zucker and Kasperi Kapanen and company, they're crashing the net. You saw that for Zucker's goal where he was able to beat Sorokin. Kind of got a little bit of a fortunate bounce, I would say. But, he's been one of their best wingers all season. I would probably say he has been their most consistent winger this season, which is weird to say because Jake Gensel's obviously been awesome and Rickard Rakell. But without Zucker, I don't even know where this team would be right now. And that unit, they're keeping it simple. The first unit, they're doing anything but that, overpassing, not being able to gain the zone. It's cost them, I think, a lot of games this season. And, right now they're in like a 2 for 20 stretch coming, over these last, handful of games coming out of the All-Star break. Not good enough at all. But I think that's going to wrap up the second segment. Coming up to end the show, I think we're going to get into I think the outlook for these teams for the rest of the season, what this loss means for the Penguins, obviously what this means for the Islanders, and, can the Penguins battle back out of this really rough patch that they've digged themselves into, because they had a chance to really bury the Islanders in these last couple of games. And, they may have just buried themselves a little bit in a way. But before we get to that, as I have my wonderful FanDuel promo right here, the midway point of the NBA season is here, and now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. It's bonus bets back if your first bet does not win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and Locked On. So we're back in this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Hunter Hodes. That is Phil from Islanders Twitter. So, Phil, we knew this stretch was going to be big for both teams. The Islanders were coming in reeling. They got 2 out of 6 points against Senators, the Canadiens, and the Canucks. I believe that is correct from what I had on my show last week. And you're thinking, they're playing bad. The Penguins, they're jumping all over them on Friday. They lead 4-2 late in the second period. A stupid decision by Mike Sullivan to throw the Jeff Carter outline out there, gets the Islanders right back in it. They then win 5-4 tonight. You're playing well. You're really out shooting them. Sorokin's standing on his head, but same mistakes happen, and you end up losing this one. Do these wins change your outlook for the rest of the season for the Islanders? Do you think they can really make a push here for that final playoff spot, despite not having Matt Barzal for the foreseeable future? Because, they didn't win with him tonight, but I don't know how often they're going to win with him down the stretch.
Yeah, and that's the real question. They've got a pretty tough stretch coming up here. They've got Winnipeg on Wednesday night. They got LA on Friday night, which is a team they really struggle against, because they struggle with these teams that are young and have speed and, skate circles around them. Then they've got Minnesota and Winnipeg again. I'm not sure if that's the order leading up to the deadline. And, the worst case scenario would be a situation where they do enough for Lou to decide that he wants to mortgage more of their future for this particular team, and then they end up missing the playoffs. That would be a disaster, and that's a distinct possibility, and you never know what Lou's going to do. But I think they've got a really tough path here. I think that aside from the Barzal injury, I think an injury that's been enormous for them has been Pajot. They have no shutdown line right now. They used the Pajot-Parise pair plus Holmstrom or Palmieri or whomever's been the third wheel on that line very effectively against teams' top lines, right? You don't want to be matching Horvat or Nelson up with the Crosby line, because more often they are going to get run over. And we saw that in both of these games. So they're missing some key pieces. They've got guys in the lineup who frankly shouldn't be on NHL rosters. But what it will come down to is they've got an all-world goalie who's playing out of his mind for most of the season in Sorokin and can steal you games like he has tonight.
Yeah.
And they have just enough talent in their top 6 where they can score some goals like you saw tonight, which is what's going to make things interesting, right? It's been who wants these 2 spots, who doesn't want these 2 spots the least is what it's looked like. Last year you had 8 teams that were just on blistering 100-point paces, and it was put away by Thanksgiving. And this year, I plugged it in tonight. The line right now for the 7 spot is the Penguins. They're only pacing 92 points. I mean, you're going to have there's a real chance that you have 2 sub 95 point teams making the playoffs in the East this year, which is fascinating and a real 180 from what the East looked like last year.
Yeah, it's crazy how it's a complete 180 from me. And you're right, Phil. People were saying, towards last year, the Islanders, they have so many games in hand. It was over, by Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. You could argue, but this year is anything but that. And for me, it's time for this GM to make some changes. I'm sorry, you can only say so many times, "Oh, I like my team on paper," blah 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 blah. You have 10 days until the trade deadline. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear the salary cap is an excuse. I am sorry. The Toronto Maple Leafs just found a way to acquire Ryan O'Reilly, and they are paying their core players, what's the numbers? 65% of their salary cap is going to them. It's probably a little bit more. I don't want to hear the salary cap is a concern. The Penguins are paying Sidney Crosby, Jake Gensel, Genny Malkin, and Chris Tang $28 million for this season. If you want to add Jason Zucker and Rickard Rakell, those players a combined $39 million, and yet they still have salary cap problems. But again, I don't want to hear that as an excuse.
Do you have a favorite trade target?
What'd you say? Do
you have a favorite trade target for them to go after?
I had it as O'Reilly. I think he made a lot of sense, but the Leafs paid a hefty price to do that. Right now, I like Adam Henrique from the Ducks. He makes a lot of sense. Good center. I know he's a little bit older, but he can score, play well defensively. Max Domi from the Blackhawks makes sense. He's kind of a punk to play against, I think, at times. Can also put the puck in the back of the net. In terms of centers, those are probably, two of my top ones right now. But I also think they need a third line winger, because Brock McGinn has now gone 22 straight games without a point, not a goal. He had that nice heater to start the season, but he has been brutal the last 6 to 7 weeks. Kasperi Kapanen, he is also nowhere to be found. They really just need to remake that entire third line. And I just don't think they have the assets to do it. But, it's time for him to make some changes here. They're probably not going to sell. I know people want them to, but that's just not going to be in their MO. But until that deadline hits, so they got to start banking some points here. They got the Oilers coming up on Thursday. They go to St. Louis after that. I think they come home after that. If I want to double check here, come home after they play the Blues. They play Tampa Bay next Sunday. That's a back-to-back. Then they go to Nashville, Tampa Bay, Florida, and then they come home and play a lot more Metro games. Columbus, the Islanders again, Flyers, Rangers. This schedule is going to get really nasty here for the Penguins. So it's all about them, I guess, finding that consistency, somehow redoing that third line, and just changing some things up. The definition of insanity, as Alan Walsh tweeted the other night, Phil, is doing the same thing again and expecting results. I don't think he's going to tweet that to Mike Sullivan or the Penguins Twitter account, but I think his tweet applies here.
Right. The veiled shot at Sutter right there. I'll say this. I think getting the 8th seed is probably going to be a waste of time for anyone who gets it. Boston just looks like a fully operational Death Star. You never want to rule it out, though, because we did see that Columbus-Tampa upset, and it could happen. You never know. I think the Canes are more vulnerable than people think. I think if you look back at how the Rangers beat them last year, they were not able to do much of anything on the power play because they don't have any elite goal scoring talent there.
Couldn't win on the road either.
Couldn't win on the road. They couldn't win on the road. Their power play wasn't great. Couldn't put anyone away, or in particular the Rangers. And this year, their goaltending has been bad at times, really bad. And I've lived in Toronto long enough to have seen enough Freddie Anderson Game 7s to know that you just cannot trust that guy. I think the Canes should get a goaltender. Now, this is subject to change if they get Timo Meier. If they get Timo Meier, I take all this back. I think he'd be a beautiful fit there, and he solves a lot of the problems that they thought Pacioretty was going to solve for them up until his second Achilles tear. But I think they're a team that could potentially be a vulnerable 2 seed.
Yeah, they still haven't truly proven anything yet. They did have that run to the conference final. I believe that was 2019.
Where they got swept by Boston?
Yes. Yeah, that was funny. I remember that. Islanders sweep the Penguins. Canes sweep the Islanders. Canes get swept by the Bruins. I'll always remember it for that. But, since then, lost in the first round. Then you lose again, the first, second round, then you lose again, second round last year. So they really haven't proven, anything yet. But it's just the Penguins, they haven't matched up well against them this season. But I will also say, part of me thinks all 4 of those games were 50-50s, 1-goal games. 2 of them went to overtime. The Penguins definitely could have split the season series with them. But that's part of the reason why they've lost 9 straight games against Metropolitan Division teams, which is something that has never happened in the Mike Sullivan era. That you're usually one of the best teams in the division against other divisional opponents. But something's got to give here. Got to get better goaltending. Defensive play has to be cleaned up. Top power play unit has to be better. And it's time for this GM to finally make a stand and show that he is different from his ways in Philadelphia. Because right now, I don't see a way you bring back any of this front office next season. It's probably best to clean house once the season is up. That's how I'm feeling right now. But if you have anything else you want to add about this game or in general, Phil, I'll leave the floor to you here. Anything stand out about this game or in general?
All I'll say is I hope that the Pens keep losing, because that would benefit my team from Long Island.
Well, I wish I and a lot of the listeners here could share that sentiment, but no, I don't think that's going to be the case.
I do want to say this, though. I had the Pens winning the Metro this year, right? And a lot of people called me crazy. I like their offseason moves. I like the idea to get Petrie. I thought they needed, a little bit of what he brings from a leadership standpoint and the way he just blasted from the blue line like we saw tonight. I like that pickup. To me, this is surprising. I did not expect them to be fighting for a wild card spot in this kind of dog race. I thought they would have had a number of, I thought they'd have it put away by now. So I was bullish on the moves that this GM made in the summer. People said he was crazy for bringing back Letang and bringing back Malkin. But, what was the alternative? The alternative, you were just going to strip it down. You may as well, you already have Crosby here. You've got Gensel. You recommitted to Rust and then Raquel. I thought they had some nice pieces here.
Yeah,
unfortunate for them that Jeff Carter, who by the way, when he was acquired at the trade deadline, he was a fantastic piece. It's just his hands and his legs have gone rather quickly, which happens when you reach the age that he is. He hasn't aged as gracefully as Zach Parise or Patrice Bergeron. I'm not going to put Parise with Bergeron, but he has not aged as gracefully as the Bergerons or Pavelskis or Krejcis.
Zach Parise, totally. As you said to me the other day, Penguin killer, just like Josh Bailey and now Brock Nelson.
Oh man, he was a beauty tonight.
Yeah, he was. He was very, very good, and he's been great against the Penguins his whole career. But yeah, Jeff Carter, first half of last season was great, and then it just all fell apart. He gave him the extension, quite literally, gave him the extension, and then it just all fell apart. And there was a time where I thought the Penguins could win the Metro this season. They were running through the league after they had that losing streak. They were great in the latter parts of November. December, they're playing great. And then all of a sudden after that, the inconsistencies returned, some of the injuries happened, and it's just been a seesaw for this team since. And, I understand some people like some of the moves. I didn't mind the Petrie one. I thought he was going to be a lot better than he has been so far. Hasn't really lived up to it. Due to cap problems, they couldn't even have Ty Smith on the team, even though I think he played better than POJ at camp, though I think P.O. Joseph has been pretty decent this season. But then, when you give all that money to Carter and you still have McGinn on your payroll and you bring back Kasperi Kapanen at $3.2 million, which is also ridiculous, this is what you get. And it's a flawed roster, and the top 6 has to do everything every night, as well as Crystal Tang, and this is what you have so far. And the GM is now searching for answers while saying that he likes his team on paper, which is, again, hilarious. But I think that'll do it for this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. Really appreciate you coming on, Phil. Just where can everyone find you on social media if they want to read your wonderful Islanders takes and just takes around the NHL?
Just Phil's Facts. That's Phil's with a Z Facts.
Yeah, go follow him there. He's in terms of Islanders followers, probably one of my favorite ones, probably the best one out there.
Oh, thank you.
I will say. And I'll have another episode coming for this podcast tomorrow, which is, of course, Tuesday. A lot to discuss when it comes to this team. We'll see if they can dig themselves out of the hole right now, because as I see it, maybe people are more bullish than me with their playoff chances. I'm just starting to get that vibe that they may not get in, which is just really unfortunate. But that's how I see it. At least I'll eat crow if I'm wrong, of course. But thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be back with you all on Tuesday.